You are watching the POLCAST.
Good afternoon, North America. It is Monday, January 13th. 1 week from inauguration, and things seem to be heating up. But not in a good way. Seems like the entire West Coast is on fire. Seems to be a trend. But why is that? Well, we're going to dive into a couple things today and bring up a couple things that we've seen as these fires rage. And then on the other end of that, you got people on the East Coast that are freezing their ass off. Is this part of a larger plan? Something nefarious in the background? Well, we're going to speculate a little bit on that today. Hello, America, and welcome on into the POLCAST. My name is Mike, and I'm here today with the Colonel. Welcome in the Colonel. And we were going to do something this weekend, but it just, everything kind of collapsed in on that plan. But we're here today. So we're going to take the next hour, roughly, to kind of give you our insight and what we see as former Green Berets, now retired and falling apart. But, you know, I still think that, you know, we try to, you know, we try to better ourselves consistently. You know, it's kind of it's like a roller coaster ride physically, especially, you know, pushing 50 now.
Wow.
It's like, you know, what do you mean, wow? You're right there, too, with me.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah,
when you hear it, it hits home a little more.
Yeah. We won't talk about that too much, but I like most people, you know, people are trying to get themselves back in shape. It's the new year, and I've done it before, but I've gotten back into fasting, and I did a 42-hour fast the other day.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, and afterwards, like literally, food was just like it was amazing, and I'm trying to eat better. Like that first meal back. After you do a fast, they say like you should that meal should be, you know, something of healthy, not quality food. Yeah, exactly. And I did for the most part. I think I had some chicken and some nuts and berries that I foraged from the woods.
Well, as you know, I spent the last 2 days on a roof, and I feel like I got my ass kicked.
Oh yeah. So how many screws do you think? You said 25 sheets, right?
Yeah.
Well, like what is that? What were the size of the sheets?
17 long.
Oh man! So how many screws would you say are in each one of those sheets?
Probably 60 to 70.
For each sheet?
Yeah, there's 8 across each row.
That's a lot of screws.
There's a lot of screws.
So
probably more like 80.
Is it safe to say then those last 2 days there was no screwing around?
There was no screwing around.
Hey, we'll be here all week, folks. Well, that's enough screwing around for us. So, like I said, welcome on into the POLCAST. I did want to mention something real quick before we get into these fires. It's been kind of quiet as far as Matt Berg and the other gentleman that took a vehicle and used it as a battering ram in New Orleans, and that story kind of just seems to have disappeared.
Very quiet.
I'm going to dig into that a little bit this week. We might be doing a show this weekend with several other gentlemen. We'll see. We don't have anything concrete yet, and maybe we'll dig into that a little bit more. But today, we kind of wanted to look into, you know, what's going on with these fires in California, and this seems to be a trend. And there are several things that, you know, come to mind, especially somebody who used to live in California. And one of them is you know, California doesn't do things like controlled burns. They're overly, what's the word I'm looking for? Overly protective of the environment, which isn't a bad thing. but you're kind of bypassing people's safety when you're worried about things like
Smelt fish.
smelt fish. As an example of that, look, this little bastard right here. And you know, you look at something like this little minnow here, which from what I understand isn't even native
No.
to the area.
Nope.
But it's protected now.
Yep.
And like I said, I lived in California, and when I first lived in California, I was in the Marines, and I was stationed in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii, but I did a lot of time on Pendleton, and we'd always make fun of the fact that we couldn't train in this area on Camp Pendleton because they found a pocket mouse.
Yep.
And I didn't even know what a pocket mouse was. I seen one, and I was like, that's the smallest rat I ever seen.
Yeah, we dealt with that on a range trying to shoot in Washington State.
Oh, they have them up there too, huh?
Well, it was a different creature, but I remember thinking to myself as a young private in the Army, like, are we really delaying training right now for a turtle?
Oh, it was a turtle.
Yeah, I believe it was a turtle.
Yeah, I think most creatures like that, small creatures, have the advantage of being small and being able to hide, and they have predators they have to deal with. And I'm not saying we shouldn't protect these creatures, but that pocket mouse shit, I don't get that at all.
Nope.
It's
I think there's
a rat.
I think there's a common theme there, Mike, that even you and I are coming to grips with. When these people are conducting this nefarious activity, it's always in the verbiage or the guise of doing something good.
protecting the environment.
There we go.
Saving the environment from things like global warming, or when I was a kid, I can remember it. I don't know if you can remember this. It was the new ice age.
Yep.
This is like early 80s. So, I mean, I was maybe 6 or 7, but I vaguely remember that, along with the fallout drills, because I lived in Wyoming at the time.
Yeah. It's as stupid as saying that Bill Gates is a philanthropist.
Yeah.
But that word conjures up in your mind a good thing.
Or George Soros.
Yeah.
Is somebody that fights for human rights and for all of us to have a slice of the pie, which...
Yep. There's always a cloak of goodness
over
the nefarious activity.
Absolutely. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into the first slide that I have for today's episode, and bring it up right now. So these are a couple of things that I've noticed. One, you got an individual there down at the bottom. He's got a red circle around him. Now, this guy was caught. He's one of 20 people that have been caught setting fires. And the interesting thing about this cat is that he had 5 cell phones on him when he was caught. And he also had a debit card connected to the UN. And my first thought hearing that is, well, this guy probably came through the Darien Gap, because down there, the UN is deep and has set up shop to facilitate and move people with the quick step into the United States. And my concern always was, you have all these NGOs in the United Nations down in the Darien Gap facilitating the movement of people into the United States, and they're giving them things like cell phones, debit cards. And there was even pre-election voter registration cards. And I don't know the other individuals. This guy kind of stood out because of the fact that he had 5 cell phones, and they did have a debit card that was connected to the United Nations. In addition to that, so people have done some research, and as you can see here, this forest fires as a military weapon. There's a report that was done in June of 1970. And, the DOD and the Wizards of Smart always do these tabletop exercises to see what would benefit them in war. So they're always constantly game planning, scenarios. So this doesn't necessarily mean, and like I said, we're speculating. This doesn't mean this is exactly what happened. But in order to paint a better picture and to understand what's going on, you need to look at all avenues. And that's just kind of what we're doing. That's why we're speculating. So with that being said,
Real quick, you just brought up another very valid point, and we're all guilty of doing this. We look at what is happening, and we get focused on that, and we discuss that, and that's fine. But just like you brought up, the Darien Gap, everybody knew that all those people were being flooded across our border.
Yep.
Everybody knew they were being bussed. Everybody knew they were flying around.
Absolutely.
But nobody ever asked the question, who's doing that? Mm-hmm. You and I both know, as former military guys, there is a shitload of logistics
absolutely
that is involved in moving. I mean, it's hard enough to move a 12-man ODA from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. And those are guys that know what's going on and know what they're doing and want to go there.
And have the capability to,
yes,
flex to the left or the right, maybe allow themselves to be strung out somewhere for a while before they reach their final destination. Yeah. And, we expect that in the military because of how large it is and how much of a bureaucracy it is, where you think you're leaving at this time and then you're sitting on a tarmac for a day waiting. And you're wondering, well, why is it that we're waiting here? And logistically, well, we don't have fuel here, and this happened.
A lot of moving parts.
Yes, and usually we're not walking where we're going, and so that kind of takes a little bit out of the planning. But you still have to. I mean, these people are showing up at the southern border, like I had already mentioned, with cell phones, debit cards. Yeah. A planned route and information on how to get into the country legally, I guess you could say, even though their first act coming into the country is illegal.
Yeah. They literally set up bus stations there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And nobody ever talks about that, which I think is kind of what we're hitting on today, is we're looking at what's happening, but what you're getting ready to expose is, I believe, a bigger picture, and that's
a larger umbrella that covers... So to kind of move into what the Colonel just said, if you look here up on the right, well, first let me hit on this Smart LA 2028.
Boom.
They are planning massive infrastructure change.
Smart cities.
In California. Oh, and wouldn't you know that? It's planned right around the 2028 Olympics. And, California's $68 billion in debt, I think, and is doling out a lot of cash and a lot of benefits to illegals currently. So money kind of seems to be, even though they have one of the largest economies in the planet, money kind of seems to be an issue. So when I see something like this, where the president back on January 9th announces that the federal government will cover 100% of the cost of measures to protect lives and property in Southern California for 6 months. Now, just reading that, I'm like, 6 months? Yeah, I'm going to call bullshit on that, because the government never, once they start funding something, they never stop. So this seems like they're setting up California like some trust fund baby. Yes. They're going to take care of them.
Yes. And following a pattern here, Mike, prior to COVID, 4 years ago, California had the largest negative deficit of any state in the country, which was known, which he admitted, Newscomb. As soon as they released the COVID, and yes, I said released, he actually had the nerve and the audacity to go on live television after they dished out all the emergency funds and say, we've got the biggest surplus of any state.
Yeah. Go figure.
Pattern here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And right now, the one thing I that is not speculation is everybody from the mayor that wasn't even in LA when this was going on. She was in Africa in some junket. The fire chief and the governor are pointing fingers at everybody else and not looking in the mirror.
Nope.
And it concerns me. I'm going to pull up this other side real quick just to illustrate this point, that the president would say something like that, and you can see here in the corner, looks like a shanty town with bricks and tents and This is North Carolina. This is where people are that were affected by the hurricane. It was Helen or Helena, and they're still kind of in no man's land and wondering. Now FEMA did come out the other day and say that they were going to extend hotel stays for folks that, and I don't know how many people that is, who that all involves, but it makes me sick almost reading that the president is willing to help California out, lickety split, no issues, no questions, but yet the folks in North Carolina are still wondering, are they going to get any assistance? Why are all these illegals getting assistance, getting things like I mentioned, debit cards, phones, housing assistance, schooling assistance, and Americans that paid into the system are getting screwed over once again.
Yep.
So let me go back real quick to this other slide, the first slide, so I can hit on this Club of Rome thing, because one of the things that's been in the news that, looking at it at first glance, most people would say, well, how is that connected? Trump got elected. The Democrats were short 15 million votes. He kind of, literally, it seems like, he'll say, Trump would say that too big to rig, which, I semi-agree with. But the Democrats and how they operate, they just don't leave 15 million votes off the table.
Nope.
It almost kind of seemed like they cowered and stuck their tail in between their legs and said, okay, I submit. That's not a common thing for the DNC.
That is outside of their pattern of life and how they operate.
Absolutely. I would say even most politicians, they just don't operate like that. So I kind of, and like I said, this is speculation. And I did a promo too a couple days ago where the first thing I said was, I'm not a fan of Trump. And I'm not. I'm not. But as somebody who, in our world, in the soft community, you're always going to work with people you don't like or you're not a fan of.
Dude, I got a hug and a kiss from a guy I knew was putting bombs in the ground trying to kill me 3 months prior.
Really?
Yes, in Afghanistan.
Was he A&A?
He was a
or Afghan Army?
Yeah. He was one of the ones that the team prior to us trained up. They were staging firefights at night, and we may have intercepted some of their communications in various ways and found out that they were planning IEDs, staging a firefight, and trying to get us to QRF them.
That's and that, like, during the war, I mean, that's something all of us had to worry about.
Yeah, you're always working with people that
you got to always kind of keep a side eye on. And honestly, Americans should be doing that for anybody in political power. Yep. But far too often we're like, all right, I voted, I've done my civic duty, now go ahead and let's get to some football. It's playoff time. Or the Olympics. So I bring this Club of Rome thing up because this is kind of the think tank for, well, I guess I just say New World Order, kind of global government. And you look at this map that they developed back in the 60s and 70s, and it's interesting that, it kind of has America connected. Well, obviously we're connected to Canada, but as one entity, along with a very large piece of land just north that happens to be green in this picture, but is also known as Greenland. And there's been a lot of talk about that lately. And I'm kind of like, man, the ease of movement from which Trump all of a sudden got into office. We have all these problems in the country as it is right now. Like I mentioned, North Carolina. We got all these fires in California. And he's talking about Greenland. Greenland and annexing Canada. And it just seems too convenient at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the next slide, and we're gonna kind of jump around a little bit. But the whole, I guess, idea that Greenland could be a part of America, and then also today, I think Mr. White had sent me an article about how most people in Greenland are they're okay with this. They think this is a good idea.
Yeah, did you want to read that slide, Mike? I think that was important.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to read this just real quick. This group, the Club of Rome / Committee of 300, this group was organized in 1968 by the Morgenthau Group. I think I'm pronouncing that incorrect, but oh well.
Good effort.
For the purpose of accelerating the plans to have the new world order in place by the year 2000. In 1976, the United States Association of the Club of Rome was formed for the purpose of shutting down the U.S. economy gradually. That's interesting, especially with where the dollar is right now. And, I mean, it really is. The dollar is on the verge of collapse. And we keep hearing things like cryptocurrencies. And now you have the BRICS nations directly competing against the dollar to try to collapse the dollar. And they're backing their currency by gold and silver.
Yep.
We haven't done that. I believe Nixon took us off the gold standard in the 60s somewhere. So this is interesting if you look at it from a conspiracy theory angle. And there's some other things I'm going to show real quick that when you see like all the fires in California and the fires that were in Lahaina. And a lot of people, me included, think that this looks like kind of like a land grab, because a lot of these folks are not going to be able to rebuild on this property. They might designate it as protected land, or it's just too dangerous. You know, we've got these wildfires. Well, when you're not doing things like controlled burns, when you're protecting pocket mice, and you're taking land away from people.
And oh, by the way, canceling their insurance policies a couple months ago prior to the fire.
Yeah. It's almost like you're setting them up for disaster, knowing that a place like California suffers from these wildfires because it dries out so much, you know, in certain times of the year. And then you let all this overgrowth just happen, and you create the perfect conditions for wildfires.
You drain a reservoir. That could have
Drain a
helped.
reservoir.
You have firefighters hooking up to hydrants with no water. Really?
Yeah, and then the only response you get from the people that are supposed to be the managers is the finger pointing.
The scarecrow.
So the Club of Rome thing is interesting, and there's another program called the Wildlands Project that I'll bring up a slide here real quick. And if you notice, there's a book on our desk here. It's called The Earth Summit Agenda 21. Now, this is the actual book that was divvied up, I guess, at the convention in Rio de Janeiro back in '92, where the topic and the agenda was, how do we create a world that is, or an environment of, what's the words they use? Sustainment and development, I think.
Positive words again.
Positive words.
Yeah.
And how do you bring the globe under one government, essentially? And that's what this manual is about. And it seems like we're starting to see the fruit kind of develop on the tree.
Yep.
Of sustainment and development. It's always these benign words that, you know, are very like ambiguous. You know, they just kind of a broad brush.
Even words that would conjure up something positive in your mind.
Yes.
As an illusion.
Well, you don't want to be against the environment.
No.
Don't you want clean air?
No.
So, and like I said, this is speculation on our part at the moment. I'm gonna bring this other slide back up for a second. Let me bring that back up. So some of the other things that the government in California was wasting money on, instead of beefing up things like your fire department and ensuring, I think they slashed the budget like by $50 million a couple months ago, and then right before the mayor left for Africa, they were talking about slashing it another like 20 million or so.
17.6.
17.6. And, you know, some of the things that they were spending money on in the state were things like the gay chorus. I remember hearing the San Francisco Gay Men's Choir talk about, "We're coming for your children." And that That sounds great. Sign me up for that shit. Trans cafes, social justice art, really things that would help people in an emergency situation. That's what that sounds like.
Very, very important to fighting fires.
And thank God for Newsom. He came out with a post where he was talking about there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yep.
So they just launched a site, where you can get fact-based information around the clock about what's going on in Southern California.
Yep.
And one of the things I like about X, they won't shut you down necessarily, but they will post a community note on your post if it's bullshit. And they literally called him out because the website that he was directing people to was for his re-election campaign where you can donate money. And sign me up.
Yep.
And when I think of the clown show that is the state government of California and the current administration or stewardship, I see these two. And I hate showing this because I love Beavis and Butthead, and I think this is a slap in the face to them and to Mike Judge.
Agreed.
Because they are way above, and I would rather listen to those two talk than those two assholes.
Dude, that's
underneath.
a good one. I hadn't seen that one, Mike.
No, you haven't seen that one?
No, that was good.
Yeah, I was actually trying to watch Beavis and Butthead last night. The new movie was actually pretty funny because they get transported into our time. And they wander onto a university, and the professor's talking about white privilege.
Yeah.
And they're like, whoa, we have white privilege. So they go around everywhere saying white privilege, and like they go in the cafeteria and they're slapping trays out of people's hand. It was pretty funny. There's a couple other things that we're gonna go into here in a minute that have to do with interesting conspiratorial type of avenues of approach for what's going on in California. And one of those is the whole direct energy weapon theory.
Let me throw this out there before you
Go ahead.
continue, because I watched the award-winning journalist Jen Psaki.
Oh, she's great.
Circle back Psaki.
She's
today.
one of the few daywalkers that I'm like, man, she's just great.
Yes, but if you hear any of those, whatever they are,
Commentary or
if you hear this word, baseless.
baseless.
Yeah, it hit me this morning. That's one of their buzzwords. If you hear, well, Trump, baseless misinformation. If they say that,
Yeah.
what they're saying is probably true.
Yep. Yeah. They like to project a lot too.
Yeah.
They always reveal what they're going to do
they're masters
through,
of it,
through
dude.
projection. So the
Sorry, back to the energy weapons.
yeah, we'll go back, pull this slide back up. So underneath Gavin Newsom's post that he had on X, you can see that there's what looks to be like the front of a driveway off the road, and there's a blue dumpster garbage can just laying on the side. Anybody who remembers the Lahaina fires, there was something very interesting about those fires, and I got a little video I'm going to show here in a second.
Very interesting.
But the color blue is, so let me say this. The frequency of the color blue happens to be 666, interestingly enough. Also, with these smaller direct energy weapons, they are not able to burn the color blue. And people started noticing in the Lahaina fires where you've seen like, what are they, like umbrellas for tables?
Yeah.
Where, they're not opened up, but they're shut down, like the restaurant's not open. But in a street where everything was engulfed in flames and everything's burned out except these umbrellas, and they're all blue, it doesn't make any sense.
No, or a blue car.
Completely untouched.
Untouched with ash around it everywhere.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, because there's videos, and I'm going to show a video that shows this, that, the color blue is not affected by these direct energy weapons. Oddly enough, all these global entities use blue, I think because it's a non-offensive color. Everyone's like, oh, it's blue, it's nice.
Yeah. It has a calming effect.
It has a calming effect. And it's also the color of all these global entities that are assisting, like the United Nations, in the destruction of the United States.
Yep.
And are also connected to things like the Wildlands Project and I'm not certain on it for the Club of Rome, but I know the Wildlands Project for sure they are connected to. And I bring up the Wildlands Project, and I'm going to show you a video here in a little bit as well. But what the Wildlands Project is, I'm going to read this real quick, is with a goal of placing 50% of the United States into wildlands. The Wildlands Project sounds like something out of a science fiction book. When one starts reading documents from the United Nations, like the UN Biodiversity Treaty, which took place shortly after, I believe that was in 94 or 96, after the Agenda 21 convention in 92. Let me continue. Researching Wildlands and Wildlands Project on the internet though it isn't that far out a proposition. There are numerous websites that show the organizations actively working towards achieving the goals as set out in the Wildlands Project, a branch child of the Dave Foreman of Earth First and others. The Wildlands Network has a map on their website showing the wild ways desired for wolves, bears, and other long-range animals. Essentially, and you'll see it here in the video here in a second, they want to kick people out of the rural areas and put them into these mega regions. And what I mean by mega regions is this, and it's interesting that, during the Summer of Love a couple years ago, after St. George Floyd was killed because of overdose, you had these autonomous zones that were set up.
Yep.
One of them was up in D.C., and oddly enough, I'm sorry, not D.C., Washington State. I'll push for that. The autonomous zone was called Cascadia. Now, this is kind of a breakdown of another project called America 2050, where you notice that you have these mega regions. Well, they want people to be pushed into these mega regions and out of the rural areas. Easier to control, manipulate, and you don't have you essentially you can't grow food for yourself.
Nope.
You can't hunt for yourself. You have to take what the state gives you.
Yep.
And researching all this stuff, you start to develop a string chart.
Yes.
And it starts to become obvious, at least to me, that these things are all interconnected. And so what I want to do right now is play you a video. And it actually, the lady in this video, she breaks it down a lot better than I could because, well, I grew up by power lines, so my ability to regurgitate things is limited. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video right now. And it's a quick 5-minute video, but it gives a real good breakdown of Agenda 21 and how it is morphed into Agenda 2030.
In 79 nations, it's called the Agenda for the 21st Century. It's a totalitarian state being developed right now all over the world. It is the inventory and control plan. Inventory and control of all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all food, all energy, all information, and all human beings in the world. And this is a plan that was agreed to by 179 nations back in 1992. It's a United Nations plan. It's called the Agenda for the 21st Century. And so many of us around the world think that, sustainable development, it just sounds so great. Isn't it about recycling and creative reuse and creating energy and food resources for everyone? And the answer is no, it really is not. It's about moving populations into city centers, concentrated city centers, and clearing them out of the rural areas. All systems have to be brought into harmony in order to control them all. Because when systems don't meet, when they're out of balance or not in sync with one another, they can't be controlled centrally. And the goal of Agenda 21 is one world government. and total control from a central unit. Every nation that signed on to Agenda 21 has its local Agenda 21 plan. People in the United States are completely unaware of this. If I go out and talk about this, the United States press attacks me and calls me, which is totally ridiculous. It is a, but it's not a theory. It's a fact. The three pillars of United Nations Agenda 21 are economy, ecology, and equity, the three E's. And everyone sort of thinks that they know what that means, the idea of social equity. It must mean that, well, everyone's going to have access to clean water and clean air, and no one's property is going to be used as a dumping ground because they are at a poverty level. But really what social equity is about impoverishing huge portions of the population and bringing down the developed nations. Everything that we're looking at now is destined to collapse our economies. It's a totalitarian state being developed right now all over the world. And what major corporations want in this development is to be able to have full movement of workers without borders or boundaries, to be able to move their goods through without regulations, and to reduce wages. And so this is the goal. So this is what you find with social equity. And of course, economy and ecology is about, these are the three circles: economy, ecology, and social equity. And where they meet in the center is balance. But really that balance is a communitarian balance. So it's not balance of well-being of the people. What it is it's a balance for corporations so that they can exploit and control and have populations in an area, in tightly packed, dense areas, so that they can be surveilled and managed. And this is what that balance looks like as far as the development of a totalitarian state is. The mainstream media is owned by 5 major corporations, and you're not going to get this information from the mainstream press. So you need to be your own press. You need to educate yourself. You need to get out there and educate your neighbors, your community, your real community. You need to help your children understand that they're being indoctrinated from pre-kindergarten to postgraduate school. All of us have a responsibility to ourselves and to others. This is true community, to work for personal freedom. And always remember that even though we work as a group, if we do work as a group, we're all individuals in those groups, and we answer only to ourselves. And this is essential. It's essential as free human beings. This is what we are. We are free, and we need to continue to be free. And I do believe that we will win, but we have to become aware that there is a fight, and then make our friends and our neighbors and our community aware as well.
So I think that's a very powerful video that kind of gives a pretty good breakdown of what the goals are for Agenda 21. And like I said, this took place in 1992. And for me, this is kind of like the globalists' last push before they essentially break it all down, and we have this, I don't know, what's a word for it? A great, reset, maybe? And they've been planting this seed, really, for over 100 years. But in the last 30 years, they've kicked it into high gear. And I think, obviously, with the advances in technology, like TV and radio and cell phones, we are now, more than ever, I think, stuck in Plato's cave, where they have us. You know, we're just mesmerized by the false images. Yep. And you know, one of the things that I'm always curious as to why we never went back to the moon. You know, we stopped looking up at the stars, and we are now looking down at the stars, whether that's celebrities on our cell phone or athletes as we're sitting in an arena. It's all focused down. It seems, at least my interpretation, not up. So we just seen this video on Agenda 21, which is now Agenda 2030. And how I wanted to tie in what we were talking about earlier with the Wildlands project, I stumbled across this on X, obviously because my phone was listening to me and I was been talking about this. A video that Glenn Beck put out back in 2012, and it's an interesting snapshot of what the Wildlands project is and how this kind of ties into Agenda 21. So I'm going to play that video real quick now.
Amongst the stated objectives of Agenda 21 is the rewilding of America through the Wildlands Project. This project would remove human beings from over half of the land in America and deem these areas core wilderness zones. Regardless of where your family farm once was, human beings will not be allowed to set foot in these areas. There would also be highly controlled and monitored buffer zones around these areas in which travel would be severely limited.
Do you notice that the main color in that map was red? That's from ICLEI, and those are areas humans will not be allowed in. It's why they are gobbling so much land in the West. In Austin, Texas, they voted 7-0 in favor of the plan. In Texas. California, not surprisingly, is all in with Agenda 21. In Los Angeles County and 5 other Southern California counties, they're calling for more than half of all new housing to be, quote, concentrated in dense so-called transit villages, with much of it at even higher 30 or more units per acre. In other words, it's a war on future suburbia. You want to buy a house an hour outside of town with an acre or two for the family? Good luck. If your area is following Agenda 21, it will not be allowed. At the extreme local level, a group based in Germany called the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives, ICLEI. This is an important group that if you decide this is a cause that you want to be involved in, you're going to know more about this crazy, spooky group than you ever want to know. Provide all the support to any town that wants to pursue Agenda 21 policies. Not shockingly, George Soros, Open Society, and his institute is a large funder of ICLEI. Due to the crafty and benign nature of the Agenda 21 pitch, which basically amounts to save the earth type message, let's be good to the land. American cities are falling prey in record numbers to the scam, despite the plea from someone opposing the rewilding plans.
All right, I don't know exactly what, hopefully folks could make that out what he was saying, but it sounded like the video was playing on top of itself, so I apologize for that. But, you know, that's from 2012, and he highlights California.
Yep.
And we were just kind of talking as the video was playing how, you know, back hundreds of years ago, how do you get a population out of an area if you want that land? You burn them out.
Yep.
And this is speculation, obviously. But the conditions seemed perfect for the fires that have taken place over the last week and continue to burn out a large chunk of Southern California. And as we had mentioned earlier about some of the maybe tools that have been used, we know that there's been arsonists that have been caught. We mentioned the guy with the UN debit card and 5 cell phones. But there's some other things that aren't, this isn't science fiction. These are real tools, devices, weapons that are used today. I mean, we in the military, we have jets that have lasers mounted onto the front of their nose, and they can shoot targets down from 60 miles away, and they're precision weapons. Now, I'm going to show a little video here right now about, this is from Into Thin Air, a guy on X, and he had uploaded this video where you can see, you know, the mountains and Pacific Palisades are on fire, and you notice there's like this little flash of light that's up in the sky, and it's not a plane because the lights would continue to flash, and you just don't see that. But what you do see is an odd shape kind of just quick flash. Now what that is, I don't know, and I'm just speculating at this point, but it just seems interesting that you would have a flash of light like that in the sky above a fire like that. So next we're looking at this 3D printed essentially a laser gun. And I mean, this is handheld being powered by a 20 volt DeWalt battery. And you've seen it, it's cutting metal. I mean, it's a thin piece of metal, but still, he's about 15, 20 feet away from that, and he's able to burn that piece of metal and cut it right in half. And now, I mean, he's got to be probably, I'd say, 30 feet away from that cardboard box. And for him to be able to do that with that little energy gun is remarkable, really. So then he also posted this other video where you can see the radar above California, the hot spots where fires are blazing. And all of a sudden you see some type of what looks to be like a laser ray or a phaser being shot directly into that blaze. And, you know, like I said, we're speculating at this point, but these things do exist. And we do have them in the U.S.'s arsenal. Now, I'm not saying that the U.S. government is directly responsible for this, but if this guy can make a 3D printed laser like that, I'm pretty sure that other people have this capability and would use it for nefarious activity, like, you know, maybe the 20 individuals that have been arrested to this point. Now, another video I'm going to show that has to do with DEW weapons is a promo video. And I want to say this is Lockheed Martin. And, you know, they're just kind of displaying their precision laser weapons.
Identify the threats, determine whether it's a threat to the aircraft, and then employs the appropriate weapon, in this case, a laser weapon system.
What we're hearing from our customers is that they need a layered,
who are their customers, I wonder, other than the U.S.?
defensive
Probably
approach
allies, but
that can be integrated across platforms to neutralize these threats.
You know, it's funny. You know, they're very proud of creating things like this, but you know, I'm like, well, why? We've spent all this money on these weapons of destruction.
At the speed of
you know, why aren't we, you know, spending money like that on exploration, like trying to get off this planet? And that, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like Elon Musk, because he's actively looking to get the hell off this planet. And not that I want to leave Earth or anything, but my God, there's a whole universe out there, but we seem to be fixated on just, you know, killing people here, making advancements in weaponry to kill people here, or penis enlargement seems to be the norm.
We were able to integrate our laser weapon system.
So this is essentially, you know, you can see that
and receive cues from the
there is a market
the
for these type of weapons,
in order to execute
and
the full kill chain.
I would think that the U.S. is probably the biggest buyer of these weapons, the U.S. military. And like I said from the beginning, you know, this is speculation. These are things that we've noticed, and just kind of like head scratchers, really. I guess the main point that I wanted to get out of all this is that there's a lot more going on than what we're being told.
Absolutely.
And unless you're looking into this stuff actively, and I get it, you know, I was talking to my significant other last night about this. Most people, you know, you got your 9 to 5 and you come home and you want to decompress and you want to spend some time with the kids, or you got chores to do, or you're working on projects around the house. And the last thing you really want to do is dive into, let me do some research in, you know, how the world works and who are the people trying to fuck us over. Mm-hmm. And so I get that. I was fortunate enough that once I retired, you know, it just happened to be around COVID. So it was like, you know what, I need to start looking into this stuff and finding out, you know, why all this stuff is happening. And when you start putting it on the board of a string chart, like some detective trying to solve a murder, you start seeing all these things that are interconnected that just, you know, they don't make sense, or it seems, you know, too coincidental, you know, and I don't believe in coincidences. And I wonder, like, man, are we being set up again? And then the one thing that, you know, kind of freaks me out a little bit is what was just recently passed by the Biden administration Actually, let me backtrack here just 1 second. I did want to show another video real quick on something interesting about a lot of these houses in California. Now, I don't know if this is mandated, but they have these smart meters that are connected to these homes, and a lot of these smart meters have lithium like batteries in it, or lithium parts, something to that degree. But this lady noticed that, you know, her in her neighborhood. I'll just go ahead and play the video.
Does not have a smart meter on this house, on the front part of his house. There's no smart meter. No smart meter. So the house did not burn.
There's no smart meter, but it looks like
Smart meter and everything in the back of his
Might not be too smart.
yeah, and his yard looks like shit. Look, they didn't burn that house because they're like, well, it looks like crap anyway. We don't even need to burn this one.
perfectly fine. But the back house is completely gone. And that's the one with the smart meter.
That's pretty interesting. So, I mean, we know about these lithium batteries that they have the tendency to explode, and cause a fire that'll get out of control. And I've heard that, you know, fire departments responding to like an electric car, a lot of times there's nothing they can do. They'll just let it burn out because it's so intense. And, you know, you have these massive lithium batteries inside these vehicles. And so they just let them burn, essentially. And now you look at all these homes in California, you know, it's all about progress. And I haven't lived there in over 20 years, but I would imagine that they're all about these type of systems being in place in people's property.
Yep.
And as, you know, the earlier video that talked about, you know, they want to get people out of the rural areas and stack them on top of each other in these metro areas so they can control them, essentially.
Command and control.
And well, a lot of people would be like, they ain't going to do that. How are they going to do that? You know, what would be one route that they could use? Well, we just had, back in September, I believe, DOD directive, where is it? Bam, here it is. DOD directive 5240.01. Now, this was updated from the 2016 version, and this has to do with active U.S. military operating with law enforcement on U.S. soil.
And specifically authorizing the use of lethal force
Yes.
on U.S. soil.
And so we'll just take a look at the key points here real quick, or the key updates to this DOD directive. Use of lethal force. The directive allows military intelligence components to assist law enforcement in operations that involve lethal force. Conditions for force. The directive specifies lethal force can be used under conditions involving imminent threat. Well, you would have to have like an operation going on to have imminent threat. Legal oversight and use of lethal force must comply with DODD 5210-56, ensuring proper legal frameworks are followed. The whole idea, you know, this is, I don't care, like it even says here at the bottom, although the directive expands the DOD's powers, some interpret it as more restrictive than it appears. I'm going to call bullshit on that, because this is talking about military personnel being allowed to use lethal force against Americans. And that is, in my book, that's crossing a red line. And I mean, I can remember in Afghanistan, the last time I was there in 2016, somebody could point a gun at you and you could not engage.
We were ROE when I was there in 12, 13, was basically you are not authorized to shoot until you get shot at.
Yeah, that's insane. And we were as well, you know, and they could shoot at you. You bring your gun up to the ready and they drop their gun. You can't shoot them.
Nope.
It was insane. And this is, you know, what is right here where it says conditions to force. The directive specifies lethal force can be used under conditions involving imminent threat. Well, what's an imminent threat?
Yep.
That's not, I mean, it's not specified. There's
Whatever
no,
they define it as.
Yeah. And obviously they haven't defined it yet, so it can be very vague and they can use for whatever nefarious purposes they have. And that makes me think of some young E1, E2 being put in a position where they do not understand what it is that they've been given as far as ROEs.
Yep.
And then you might have a situation where they're surrounded by an angry mob of people that just had their houses burned down and they don't fully understand the scenario. But hey, I feel like these people could possibly hurt me.
Yep.
So I'm going to engage.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions to this, and why right now? Why did they do this right now? What was the intent? Right before this administration's leaving and a new one's coming in.
Yep.
We've seen from Trump's last president, his last 4 years, that the left was hell-bent on disrupting anything that he was trying to do.
Yep.
And, you know, then we have the summer of love, and now you're just upping the possible conflict between, you know, say if there's a state of emergency or something, who knows? And I think California just had a state of emergency, or currently in a state of emergency. So
every time they want to dish out money to the Democrat states, they declare an emergency.
State of emergency.
Yep.
So we're gonna keep our eyes on this. One last thing that I didn't show that I thought I should probably bring up real quick.
Yep.
The Wildlands project. You see right here, if you look up, just go and Google, do a search on the Wildlands project.
These are their own words.
Yes, these are their own words. They're not hiding it. And you look at that. Comes right up to Agenda 21 courses. And
wow.
It literally is like they're not hiding it, but they understand that most people, like I said, are so involved with their day-to-day that they're like, well, nobody's gonna look into it anyway. They're not going to do the research for themselves.
Nope.
And
also in their minds, they're justified by what they're doing because we told you.
Yep. Yeah, we put it out there. You didn't question it. You didn't look into it for yourself. Now you're going to bend the knee.
That's right.
So to kind of drive that home, we're not going to be able to touch into. I had a video of Trump in his last Q&A with reporters, but we're not going to be able to get into that today because I do want to play this one last video to kind of drive this home from somebody that I think was. In his later days, he wasn't as funny. I think it was because he kind of turned into more of a crotchety old man, and that's George Carlin. But what he says here is very profound, and to me, it's very true.
Absolutely.
What he's saying. So we're going to play this video real quick.
Get the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. You know something? They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. And by the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hard-working people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hard-working people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't.
They don't. You know, it's funny. He said it's a big club, and we ain't in it. Maybe it's a club of like, I don't know, a committee of 300 or something.
Get that book.
Yeah. So words of wisdom from George Carlin. And so I think that pretty much wraps up today's episode. And, you know, I'm praying for everybody in California right now, especially those folks in Southern California and those folks in North Carolina that were affected by the hurricane a couple months ago. We need a wake-up call, America. We cannot just continue to go through the motions. Trump won, and I'm going to give him a chance. I'm hoping that he does the right thing. But, man, there just seems to be too many things happening right now that just do not, they don't feel right, at least to me. What do you think, Colonel?
Agreed. I got one thing.
Hit it.
I've even heard smart, educated friends of mine say to me, "Oh, Nick, you're starting to sound like a conspiracy theorist." And when I ask them, "Do you know where that term came from?" Of course, they all say no.
Is it a 3-letter agency?
It's a 3-letter agency that invented that term and popularized it so that anytime somebody outed the facts and the truth of what was going on, they could be labeled a what?
Conspiracy theorist.
Boom, look it up.
Also, I'd recommend getting this book. You can find it on Amazon still. A lot of interesting things in that book that, I don't know, seem to be kind of unfolding in front of our eyes.
Absolutely.
So make sure you're taking care of yourself, your family, your body. That's the thing you can do. You can, if you want to change your body first. Change your mind and your body. Try to be healthier and be more of a contributor to not only your own world or life, but it's infectious. People see, you know, you start to do better, you start to lose weight, you maybe stop drinking and stuff. People will see that and it'll amplify it. And I'm hoping that, you know, looking into this stuff will spread. And more people will get involved, and they'll see what's going on, and more questions will be asked.
Absolutely.
God willing.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime, bro. And once again, folks, if you can, stay out of Plato's cave. Put the cell phone down in the evening. Don't grab it first thing in the morning.
The chain's not hooked to the wall.
That's
Get
right.
up and walk out.
You notice that he's not shackled to the wall. He's holding the shackle.
Yep.
Like a cell phone. Like a bottle of booze, like a drug, or a piece of food, while he's watching caveman TV. So none of us are perfect, but to really make any change, the change has got to start with you first. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You can check us out on the X Machine at Liberty Ape 76. And until next time, Godspeed, long live the Republic, and have a good day, everybody.